and yes, first of all, welcome back.
Yay.
It's we started off strong, and then the weather hit us.
Yeah.
Oh,
we
man.
have not left the small town that we live in for 3 weeks.
Yep.
Which is odd.
Yeah.
So we are finally.
Yeah, finally getting back to. So we haven't been able to go to a movie.
No.
So we haven't been able to talk about it. So yeah, so it's been kind of crazy.
Right. So yes, dystopian blizzardy was our fate here.
Yep.
But let's talk about dystopian movies. And you said teen dystopian. They kind of go hand in hand, don't they?
A lot of times. Well, teen dystopia was really big in the early 2000s.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it was a huge, especially in the YA.
Right. And I think that the Hunger Games books really kind of kicked that off.
I think you're right. Like I don't know like what came first, but it definitely felt like the Hunger Games happened, and then Divergent and Maze Runner, and
right.
There was another one.
Well, and then that kind of kick-started back in like the reboot of Mad Max.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and then more interest in Dune. I would put that in the dystopian type of.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what Dune is. Like I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. So, but yeah, just in the early 2000s, that was a big.
Well, I think you see a lot of young adult YA stuff starting to be read by adults.
Yeah.
Which kind of probably actually started with Harry Potter.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Which was a series we both love, but now.
Yeah, we won't talk about that.
Yeah, we avoid anything Harry Potter. We do not invest money in Harry Potter at this juncture in our history. But yeah, so you started getting adults reading YA novels, which kind of gives them the cred to do things like have those books go to the top of the bestseller list and then become movies.
So why do you think that the early 2000s was such a time for teen dystopia? Why was that something that seemed to resonate at that point in time? I always tell when I teach my theater classes, I always say that the study of theatrical history is the study of civilization. It's what people felt about the world around them, what was important to them, what mattered, or how they reacted to it.
I think there was a big shift between the Clinton and Bush administrations and then of course, 9/11, where you have this idea that maybe the United States isn't as secure and safe and cozy as we thought it was. Then you hit the recession as well, and you really start to hear more vocal conversations about, is capitalism going to be able to survive? Like, is what happens when you get to late stage capitalism? With the 24-hour news cycle, we become more aware of the revolutions that are happening around the world. So I just think it becomes more in the zeitgeist. And then you put it in a YA book where everything is super dramatic when you're a teenager anyways.
Yeah.
And it just kind of hits, especially when you have an author who can world build like Suzanne Collins did with the Hunger Games trilogy.
Yeah, because like the last time, and you mentioned it a little bit, but the last time like dystopia stuff was really not so much big, but that it did seem to be there. A lot of them was the 70s,
right? Which,
things like Logan's Run,
yeah,
and whatnot.
Well, and then you look, even previous to that, when you have stuff in the 30s during the Depression, you start to see things like, oh gosh, what is the name of that one about the slaughterhouses?
I don't know.
The Jungle.
Oh yeah.
The Jungle and Animal Farm and 1984.
Yep, And in the 70s, you got things like Logan's Run, Planet of the Apes, The Omega Man, Soylent Green, not Soylent and Green, sorry. But yeah, you can definitely see
It's a cycle.
Where in history these types of stories tend to be at their most prevalent.
Right.
And it is interesting, that I think you said it very well, that these ones kind of sprouted up in youth-oriented literature, things aimed at kids still in school, as opposed to, I think, college-age kids and whatnot that you saw in previous generations. This one, I think, because, like you said, the 24-hour media, social media was taken off at that time. So young people were a lot more connected to what was going on in the world around them, I think, than they ever were given the opportunity to be before.
Right. And I think that kind of still continues. Like, it goes in waves. Even if you just look at, like, my kids, my oldest is pretty tuned into politics. My middle one couldn't care less. And then my youngest, which would be the one that you would call Gen Alpha in the zeitgeist, she's very in tune to politics and social justice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it just kind of, it goes in waves. Your generation tended to be very apathetic about it.
I don't believe that to be completely true.
Okay.
I'm being honest. Like, in the 90s, like, that was the start of the new everything sucks, everything, everything, the government, and burn it down, you look at a lot of our popular culture at the time. One of the big shows at the time was the X-Files, this whole thing about question everything, question the government, question. Obviously now we know that people yelling about conspiracy theories are a lot less Fox Mulder and a lot more Fox News. But
that's good.
Thank you. I was proud of that.
I think you're so you were what, 5 years older than me? About, like, you were
4 or 5
years.
Yeah.
So you guys were cynical about it.
Yes.
You were doubting everything. You were cynical about it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we did much.
Right. Whereas, like, by the time you get to my generation, we're like protesting.
Yeah.
Signing petitions and doing things.
Yeah, my generation was the generation of bitch about things, but don't actually do much. You wouldn't get this reference, but it's that South Park episode with the hippies where they gather together to have hippie fest and stand in car like, all right, we've got enough people here, let's start taking down the government and everything. Yeah, man, we're gonna have this groovy concert. Like, well, yeah, but we need to actually do stuff. Yeah, this music's gonna make them wake up, man. And just, that was kind of my generation.
Yeah.
Nirvana tells us that the world sucks. Well, are we gonna do anything? No, we're just gonna talk about how the world sucks.
So like we talked about it in life, but like how does that show up in pop culture? So dystopian movies, dystopian
novels,
series.
Yeah.
There weren't a whole lot of standalone movies. The majority of them were series or ended up being series, right?
They became series, but the one I think of that to me was probably the most commercially successful was the Planet of the Apes series, the original.
Right.
That, was a very kind of very bleak look at the world and what was going to happen and where we were heading, and it became a series, but they never intended it to be one. It was like they were kind of ordered to make a sequel,
right,
and then make continuous sequels.
And then it did that thing where it was like cheeseball.
It never got too cheeseball. Like, actually, no, I will disagree with that. The last, the fourth in the series, they actually got progressively darker. as they went. And the fourth in the series, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which is what the newer Andy Serkis ones were kind of remaking. That one was incredibly dark.
Yeah.
So I'd say the political commentary got a little less subtle, but the atmosphere and everything got way darker. The last one, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, yeah, that one was kind of just a kiddie film. They were tired, they didn't have anything else to do. They were just like, all right, just wrap this up.
So what about modern day? Or did you enjoy any of them, like from 2000 on?
That's kind of a really hard question, because they were past the point where I was the target audience.
Right.
Like, I remember I first became aware of the Hunger Games when I was directing a production of Tom Sawyer, and all of the kids were reading it and talking about it. And I think the first movie was just about to come out. So I kind of went and saw it, kind of go, okay, this is what the kids are talking about. I need to kind of know what this is. So I'll say that of the ones that are out there, the Hunger Games was kind of the best of them, but they never really hit me the way they hit, other audiences. There's too many things in them that I think as the old man that I was and am, again, weren't aimed at me. How every, you look at Divergent and how every class is like divided up like a high school cafeteria.
That's not okay. We're going to talk about Divergent here in a minute. Okay, but with the Hunger Games, I came into the books first.
Yeah.
And my ex-husband and I actually we would like fight over the books, like as in like see who could read them, get done with them first.
Oh.
Because like they were very engaging and entertaining. And so I already was really familiar with that world. As far as movies being translated into books, the Hunger Games didn't do too badly. There was a few missteps, which we'll talk about when we get into the review, but they didn't do, like, as far as translation into books. Now, Divergent, that's totally different, because the Divergent books were very good, very thought out, very world building, had a very strong female heroine, and then when you cross that over into the movies, and they made it all about a love story, and they changed things, and I understand that you can't take a 300-page book and put it into a 2-hour movie without taking some stuff out, but they changed the heroine from being this strong, independent thinker, this, thing that was going to change the world, into teenage girl who has crush on boy. And so, like, if you've only ever seen the movie, then yeah, like, Divergent's not gonna probably be up your alley unless you're in a very specific age group. Like, I think it was bad enough that, like, the sequels didn't even come out in the theaters, right?
I think the first one did, and then I think they just kind of petered off, I think.
Right. Like, because that's how bad they were.
Yeah.
Now, the third Divergent book, I will say kind of the ending of it, like, no one's really down with the ending of Divergent. Everyone hated that. But the first couple of books, the ideas of, it's kind of like The Giver, in that, utopian society where you are put into the place of, like, you are assigned where you should be. The books were really good. The movies were not like.
See, and then again, that's kind of the thing. Divergent was the one. Again, I knew a lot of my students were reading it,
Right.
and so I'd heard about it. And it's one of those things, you're getting old when people try to explain something to you, and you're just like, wait, what? I remember trying to explain Ninja Turtles to my parents, and them getting this look on their face like, like a person got the wrong answer on Jeopardy. you know, and now I was that person because they tried to explain Divergent to me, and I just couldn't get it. It was like, wait, so if you're good at a lot of things, that's bad? You know, I was really having a hard time, like, understanding it.
No, it's your personality traits, not what you're good at. Divergent is more based on your innate personality rather than your skills.
Okay.
Anyways, so I mentioned The Giver.
Uh-huh.
And they did have a Giver movie that came out in the last couple of decades. Did you read The Giver as a kid?
I think I did. I think it was let me clarify. I think it was assigned when I was a kid. I think it was one of these before I got really serious about my schoolwork, and I just kind of skimmed and tried to.
Yeah, it would have been in middle school.
Yeah, then I don't know, because middle school is when I started to go, hey, I better start working.
Yeah.
So it may have been one of those ones that I kind of breezed through or forgot, or let's just be honest, I didn't put the effort in. Let's just be fair. Let's just call it what it is.
Well, did you watch the movie?
I did see the movie back before I started reviewing everything, and it was awful.
It was terrible.
It was so bad.
But I can't necessarily blame the filmmakers for that, because I don't know how you put that in a movie without it. Like, there's no way to put The Giver into a movie. And I think that's a problem a lot of people, that when you're translating dystopian books into movies, there's some things you just can't translate. Without it being in black and white and kind of looking cheesy, how are you going to communicate that this color has been sucked out of the world?
Yeah.
You know, how can you communicate the neutrality that there's supposed to be? They did make some major missteps with that one too, whereas like Jonah in the movie, Jonas is supposed to be like 12, and in the book or in the movie, or he's like 16.
Okay.
So that I think changed a lot of it, and I don't know. I think it just missed the spark. I loved The Giver. A lot of books, because of the way I was raised, a lot of books that kind of passed judgment or critiqued the government or society were not allowed. And so I didn't read The Giver until I was in my 20s. And then I loved it, and I read basically there's 4 books in that series by Lois Lowry, and I read them all. Like, I zoomed through them. My oldest daughter did the same. My middle kid, she loved the first one. She had no interest in the other ones. But then, like, River hasn't read it yet. So, but I just think when you get into the crossing over into the movie, there's just some things you can't communicate well in a movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where they end up. I think the best dystopian movies are ones that are not based on books and are building their own worlds.
So while we're on that, let's talk about this, since we are reviewing a Hunger Games movie. You're coming at it from a fan of the books and then into the films. I'm coming at it from a standpoint of someone who's only familiar with the films. So what's your opinion of the original series, the original 4 movies? You know, how'd they do? What did you think?
I think that the first 2 did as well as you can do to take a world and a movie and to cram them into a world and a book and cram it into a movie. I'm not as big a fan of the last 2, just because I don't think that they look the same as I envisioned in my head. But I haven't gone back and rewatched them recently, so that could be different. Now, there were, like I said, there's a couple of missteps. Katniss should not have been a white girl. Gale should not have been a white boy. There should have been at least some color in them, the way they're described in the book and the area of the country they lived in. However, I will say that they did cast some diverse, and I actually think that the newer movie does a better job of it, but they did cast some diverse people in this, in the original Hunger Games, which is why there was such a hullabaloo when Rue, who is a compatriot or one of the other kids in the Hunger Games, with Katniss, she was cast as a black girl. Mandela Stenberg, I think, was the person they cast. And that was a big hullabaloo, but if you read the book, she definitely was supposed to be black. Like, that was how she was written. So, like I said, I think they did a pretty good job. They cut a couple of characters out. And one of the downfalls with books like this, with a very serious, intense heroine, is that they do a lot of internal monologuing, which you can't necessarily put on the screen.
Unless you have like a voiceover.
Right, which I don't think would have worked for this.
Yeah, because she does kind of spend a lot of the movie just kind of staring blankly.
Right.
You know.
Which I think for what it was, I think Jennifer Lawrence did a pretty good job of communicating her thought process with the blank staring. But so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. What did you like when you first saw them? What did you think of them?
I remember being pleasantly surprised by it. It was much deeper than I thought it was going to be. And of course, the other thing we have to understand, and again, I'm not trying to restart old fights, but these were coming on the tail end of the Twilight era. So, and again, if you like Twilight, then fine. I feel stupid these days getting mad because people like something that's a fantasy. So if you're a fan of it, fine. But I just could not get past the problematic nature of Bella as a character, and I felt like Katniss was a much better role model, a much stronger, more proactive character. I like how they switched up a lot of the tropes. I like how, Peeta basically was the damsel in distress, and Katniss had to save him. I thought that was, and it felt earned. It didn't feel like it was just patronizing. It felt like it was actually the way it was supposed to be. I thought that they were directed a little flat. Like, I would expect something like this to really pop. And I think if the studio maybe had known what they'd had, they might have worked to maybe get a more experienced director or a more experimental director or something like that, who would really give it a visual language that was all of its own, instead of it's very drab, and I know that's what it's supposed to, the districts and all that are supposed to be, but the film itself doesn't really, we were talking about, like, the outfits of the peacekeepers.
Right.
Looks like they just went to storage and went, here. They don't have a look to them that is unique and different. I think they did that with the Capitol. They went a little too far visually there. So I feel like it needed a stronger director. But on the whole, I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty decent. I saw the second one too and thought the same thing.
I will say, I think that I will disagree with you on the Capitol, because that's how they're written, is so over the top. Capitol people are basically, the Roman emperors.
Yeah.
And I think that I think in the book they're written even more extravagantly than they're shown on the screen. So, but don't forget to tell me where to turn, by the way.
Oh, I will.
Okay.
But yeah, good. And again, I think of all of the teen dystopian future things that came out in that era, and like I mentioned, some things are just not for my, me, I'm not the target audience. It was the one I was able to kind of ignore the little, what I felt were plot holes the most. I was able to do the willing suspension of disbelief the most.
Okay, so I made you rewatch the first one with me, and I kind of paused and explained things that were missing. Now, what did you think of it on the second watch?
I think my original concept kind of stands. I still think it's a good movie, but I do think it is kind of flat.
Okay.
I think I can see why Katniss is a big star. I can see why it made Jennifer Lawrence a big star. I think on the whole you can do a lot worse. But I do feel like it needed a director that really could make that world feel tangible and real.
Okay.
Okay, I know we don't like to talk about this, but you think of the Harry Potter films.
Right.
And the directors they had for those really, and even though they had like 4 different directors, they all made the world feel unique and vibrant. And, then as the series went on and it got darker and, dirtier and grimier, there was that nice transition. The Marvel movies.
Okay.
The directors do the same thing. They each have kind of their own visual language, but they manage to make these worlds kind of pop.
All right. Well, let's take a break and come back and talk about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because I feel like this is I feel like this is going to go in a different direction.
I think so.
All right.
All right, so we will be back in a little bit.
All right, and we're back.
We are back, and it is time to discuss The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Okay, how do you feel about it when a sequel includes the previous thing, like Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? Like, that is a long title.
I kind of prefer it to the traditional, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Because it's like, here's the main heading, here's the series it falls under, but here's this story's title, like it is its own story.
You think it's necessary to include the original title?
I think in a lot of cases, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that the only problem you get is like when the titles become so generic and the movies are so generic that you can't tell which one's which, like the Mission Impossible films.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a fan of each film getting its own individual title.
Okay.
Thing.
Now, it just feels like this is so long.
It is a long title. I mean, yeah.
So, yeah.
So you would just call it The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
Yes, which I keep in my head thinking of Song of Fire and Ice.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So maybe that would be problematic. But I guess it's better than just Hunger Games prequel.
Yeah.
So.
Hunger Games episode, like I hate the way they've done that with the Star Wars films.
Episode 1.
Yeah, because originally it was Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi.
Right.
And then after they did the prequels, then now they're all Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. No, it's Star Wars.
Okay, fanboys, settle down a little bit.
No, I will not. I'm very mad about this. I have strong feelings.
Okay. Tell us to the internet, not me. Alright. So yes, this is the prequel. And this is a book that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Suzanne Collins put this book out a few years ago, and then now we've got the movie starring, that was a big yawn, starring Rachel Zegler,
I think.
And then we've got, I think his name was Tom Blythe.
Yes, I believe so.
As our young Coriolanus Snow, who later becomes President Snow, which is played by
Donald Sutherland in the original films.
Right. So, okay.
So it is an interesting kind of pulling a Star Wars prequel here and trying to show us how this, evil dictator basically became the evil dictator.
Right.
Or became the man that would become the evil dictator, I guess.
Okay, so how do you feel about a story like that?
I actually don't mind it. I think when it's done well, I think that chapters of long-running stories that take time to go back and explain who their villain is,
Okay.
I think are some of the most interesting. And again, I'm sorry, but I have to bring this up. But like, if you were to ask me which was my favorite Harry Potter book, it would have been The Half-Blood Prince, where we spent a lot of time
with Severus Snape.
well, not even Severus Snape, going into Voldemort's past and who he was, where he came from, why he thinks the way he does, how he operates the way he does.
The criminal psychology bit of it.
Yeah, or like they did, if you want a less problematic, no, that's wrong. I'm sorry, these are just as problematic now. Buffy and Angel.
Okay.
Both did episodes in the season they were running concurrently that showed where Spike and Darla came from and how they became who they were. I think when done well, I think it can offer kind of a new insight and give greater depth to the story.
The Spike episode was really great.
Yeah, and so was the Darla episode.
So I think that there's a benefit to it too, like societally, because it kind of shows like you don't have somebody. It's very rare to have somebody who's just straight out of the womb evil.
Yeah, you very rarely have that.
It happens, but it's not common. What you have is people who are put into circumstances and things are thrown at them, and their life pushes them in one direction, and instead of taking the fork that's going to be becoming the heroine, you're taking the fork that's becoming the villain.
Yeah. Well,
so,
it's kind of like you were talking about that. You just watched Game of Thrones.
Yes.
All the way through, and in most cases, a lot of the characters are in that mold of, yes, they're evil, but you understand kind of
they're all gray areas.
Yeah, there's a reason they do the things they do. It's not just,
with the exception of Joffrey.
Yeah, Joffrey was just a shithead.
But
and I can't even say that they give him more in the books. It's like, no, he's a shithead, just pure and simple.
Yeah, like as opposed to somebody who is just born straight out evil, but like there's gray areas. They say even Hitler loved children and dogs,
Yeah.
So thinking that somebody is just 100% evil is dangerous, because then you miss the people who are truly bad. So we got our origin story.
Yeah.
Of President Snow.
And starting out as a poorer person who, because of who his father was, he gets trips to the academy and all this, So he's on the verge of becoming someone really important, but he's definitely on the fringe of society.
Right. So we open up with the Dark Days, which is the time before the Capitol is established, the time before the Hunger Games are started. And, well, I guess the Capitol was already established. Okay, so if you're into the world, the lore of the Hunger Games, the country is Panem, which is the United States. You have the Capitol, which is actually stationed somewhere around the Denver area. And then you've got the districts line out, and each district is responsible for a specific industry. Okay? So, at the beginning of our show, at the beginning of our movie, there's been a revolution. The districts have risen up against the Capitol. And it's wartime, and Coriolanus and his cousin Tigris are young. They're kids. And Coriolanus' father executed, and basically the family is thrown into poverty, and he's raised by his grandmother and his older cousin, and they are struggling to get by, like still living in their fancy house to keep up appearances, while he goes to the academy to try to make something of himself. But
yeah, you can tell this is one of those dystopian future things. It's like, it's just the academy,
right?
You know, it's just,
so he's going to the academy to make something of himself, and then his life is thrown into turmoil, where instead of getting the prize for being the highest student, they are now being forced to be the mentors for the Hunger Games, which are in their 10th year.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, where it kind of divergent, is that, yeah, like I said, the Hunger Games themselves are in their 10th year, but the ratings are down. Nobody really cares. A lot of people are thinking it's a barbaric. And so the inventor of the games, the dean of the academy, played by Peter Dinklage, now has this idea either put to him or he comes up with it, that the graduating students are going to be the mentors for the tributes.
Well, it's the Viola Davis character who's the game maker.
Yeah.
She's the one who comes up with that.
So they now have to turn the kids into spectacles. They've got to turn them into entertainers.
And there's a lot of things that you see that are different. They have basically, Coriolanus Snow is going to come up with the idea that you have to make it something people want to watch. So you're going to have to get people to invest emotionally into the players. And so eventually you're going to see it become a lot bigger in the Hunger Games. But at this point, they're still basically treating the players like cattle.
Yeah, like it is interesting in this film to kind of see the juxtaposition of, you know, in the first film, you know, the train ride from the districts to the capital is this luxurious.
They have all kinds of food.
Yeah.
They're in the penthouse. They have this training stuff. And whereas in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, they're in a cattle car. They're shoved. They're put into a zoo cage.
And not given any food or anything like that. So basically, Coriolanus Snow, he accidentally makes a connection with his mentee, his player. Her name is Lucy Gray, and if you can't remember that, don't worry. They'll repeat it about 50 million times.
They will.
You can play a drinking game with the amount of times they say Lucy Gray in this.
Right. So he makes the connection. So he is trying to, a lot of the changes he's trying to implement are actually to try to help the players. So anyways, that's our story. Okay, so now the first thing I want to talk about, you had an issue with the world in the Hunger Games movies. You didn't think it was splashy enough, it was too drab. How did that compare to this iteration?
This one I felt was a little bit stronger, but then again, the whole world is a little bit drabber.
Okay.
You know, but I do feel like this one had a visual identity that was more its own.
Right. The peacekeepers' uniforms were very on
very
point.
Specific, but all of the outfits, all the costumes, it felt like they were, the world it created felt more like an established world and not kind of a thrown together with the athletic gear we can get for cheap and,
right.
You know.
I will say, like, the world did seem, so when they're in District 12, they are playing this music at a place called The Hob, which is a big place that takes place in the books. You see the mines a lot more, like the drabness of the mines. And then in the capital, things are still gray, but the colorfulness of the people really stands out, I think.
Yeah. They haven't quite gone to the foppish, you know, over-the-top clown makeup that they get to in the later ones.
Is foppish an okay word?
I don't know what else you describe it as.
Well,
that's what a lot of those, to me, historically speaking, the style of the fop, which was not just an archetypal character, but it was a fashion, fashion statement in France and then in England. That is very much what they look like,
right.
just with the volume turned up.
It's very Marie Antoinette's Palace of Versailles.
Yeah, but like on crack.
Right. Which is exactly what it's supposed to be like in the world, like in the building, like in the Hunger Games world in Pan Am. So I felt like the world was a lot like clearer.
Yeah.
It was a lot more represented than in the earlier movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that a lot.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about acting. Okay. Rachel Zegler.
I think she did a good job.
Okay, so Rachel Zegler, she is playing our tribute.
She is the titular songbird.
Yes. And they paid for a singer, and
damn it, they were going to have her sing. She sings a lot.
She does sing a lot. I don't think that's bad though, because so here's my little 2 cents about it. District 12 is Appalachia, specifically coal mine Appalachia. Okay, and the people that Lucy Gray is supposed to be part of, her ancestors, her family, are part of a group called the Covey, which, if I had to hazard a guess, were to represent the Roma people, the Romani people. There was a big migration of Roma people from Eastern Europe to the coal mine country and steel country of Pennsylvania in the 1900s. And so there are a lot of people who still live in that Appalachian area whose families can trace back to the Roma people, including mine. My family is Roma. So that would be my guess as to what the Covey people were supposed to represent. And Roma people tend to be very musical, and when you have a group of people that doesn't have a lot of money, they also tend to entertain themselves with music. So I feel like they would be very musical.
Okay. Okay, that's more in depth than I had thought of.
Okay.
So.
All right. So.
Because for me it was she's got a beautiful voice.
Right.
I just thought there were times okay, she's singing again. Let's. But
let's listen to her sing again.
Yes. But yeah. So yeah, she does it. What do you think of Coriolanus?
Top life.
Who's it's a tale of two haircuts.
Right.
Because in the open, for the first chunk of the movie, he looks like a Targaryen, and then the second half he looks like Eminem.
Right.
So it's a tale of two haircuts.
Yes. I haven't really seen him in anything else before.
Me neither.
And I thought that he was playing it pretty well. So I don't know. I think I don't know. I was satisfied with his performance. I think that the story and the script both get a little convoluted near the end.
Yeah.
And so I think that was going to be a hard mission for anyone to take on.
Yeah, it's a very long movie.
It is very long.
And as much as I object to this, especially they did it with the last Hunger Games book, they did it with the last Twilight book, they did it with the last Harry Potter book, splitting them into two movies. as much as I object to that, I almost feel like that would have been a better course of action here, because the first chunk is him trying to get her through the Hunger Games.
Right.
And then the second chunk, because he cheats to get her through, and he gets caught. So he's sent to be a peacekeeper in District 12.
Right. That would have been a natural place to have two different movies.
Yeah, because it feels like we spend the first chunk really, getting to know him and seeing him fall for Lucy, and seeing him, the consequences of what he does to save her. And then
you get, like, the end is rushed.
Yeah, and the end is supposed to be his heel turn.
Right.
Which I couldn't figure out where it really happened.
That's the problem. With the way that it's rushed, you don't get the explanation into
Yeah.
it.
At least, God forbid, I never thought I'd give them credit, but at least in Star Wars Episode 3, Palpatine goes, "You will join the dark side." Anakin goes, "Cool."
Yeah.
At least you see the point when it happens, rushed and nonsensical as it is.
Right.
But here it was like, you're just like, when did this happen?
Yeah.
Why is she against him now? Why is he chasing after her? What is going on? What made him do this?
Right, and I think that's really, I was with it, even with it being long, I was with it to that point.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I don't know. Okay, I eat a lot of gluten-free bread. Stick with me. This is
okay. All right, interesting.
And if you have the whole sandwich, it tends to stay together at the beginning, but once you get to the last third of the sandwich, the bread just crumbles and falls apart.
Yeah.
And you don't have a sandwich anymore, you just have the components of a sandwich.
Okay.
And that's what happened.
Yeah. And like, there's like, you can see the breadcrumbs, the gluten-free breadcrumbs, but they don't like, okay, so he also has this friend who's the whiny protester.
Right.
Who all through the movie, that's all he does. And Snow, you get the feeling that Snow sells him out to get in good so he can go back to the Capitol. But here's the thing, Snow was already on his way up.
Right.
They were already going to send him to officer training. They were already going to do it. That was going to get him his position back anyway.
Right.
So that being his turning point didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, like, and I haven't read the book yet.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it makes more sense in the book or not, but the way that it's presented in the movie definitely is lacking something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I will agree with you.
Now, here's my 2 cents on this. As long as it was as convoluted as it was towards the end, I actually thought for the most part it was an interesting film.
Okay, good.
I thought for the most part it was doing a good job. It was an interesting new take on a familiar topic and all of that. Until the very last scene. That's when I got really mad at this movie.
Okay.
So in the very last scene, Snow goes to confront Peter Dinklage, who, as we said, is credited as being the creator of the games. And Dinklage tells him this story that he created the games when he was a student, and he did it as a joke. It was an assignment they had. Come up with a way to keep the districts in line.
Punish your enemies so they never forget they're being punished.
Yeah, so he got drunk one night and came up with this idea of this blood sport, and Snow's father took it and turned it in.
Right.
And so now Peter Dinklage has been plagued with guilt about this thing that he came up with as a joke, being responsible for all these innocent kids being murdered.
Right.
And where I got mad is I'm like, why am I not watching that movie?
Yeah.
Because that, to me, sounds like a way, way more interesting story than glamming up the games to make them more exciting, as opposed to this story of someone who did something foolish, and that foolishness resulted in all this, all these horrible things, especially in this political climate. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I honestly think the way Trump got elected is from a lot of people going, oh, ha, 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 this will be so funny.
Right.
Because I've known a lot of people who said that, oh, because he says such outrageous things, he does such outrageous things, it'll be funny to see him as president. And we learned very quickly, it's not.
It's not.
That this is not a joke.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would have been such a powerful story to tell.
Right.
Of this person, doing one stupid thing leads to all this misery.
I could see that.
And I just felt like that's more a movie I wanted to see.
I will agree with you on that. I would like to see that. But also part of that is because I just want to watch Peter Dinklage do anything.
That's true.
So how did you find his performance?
Peter Dinklage is always good.
Yep.
I know a lot of people just say it's a little too close to Tyrion Lannister. I think it has flavors of Tyrion Lannister, but I don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah. Also, well, yeah, I guess Tyrion was a drunk.
Yeah, but this one was a morphine addict, so
yeah.
Same difference.
Morphine, thank you very much.
Yes, but here's the thing about, and I think Peter Dinklage knows this because he's a smart guy. Doing a film like this pays your bills.
Yeah.
And then you go and you can do your Cyrano or your movie about him being an opera writer, and you don't really care if that one hits. So if he has to go and play his Tyrion character just in a different movie series, I don't think he minds, because it's money.
Right.
It's the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry
now we have
philosophy.
Another phenomenal actor in here, Viola Davis.
Yeah.
As the game maker.
As the devil.
Oh my god. What a fun role to play. Don't you think?
It was, yeah. And it's funny because we were talking about, this movie showing levels and how this character got, there. And this is pure Disney evil.
Oh, like just the most cartoonish villain, but
this is
played so you needed a Viola Davis.
Yes, you did. You needed someone that good to
give gravity.
Because she is chewing the scenery and flossing with the props.
She's amazing.
She is really good. She's captivating every time she's on screen.
And these costumes that they have her in with 2 different eye colors.
Yeah.
And the rubber gloves all the time.
That are like blood red, so it always looks like there's blood on her hands.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it was corny as fuck, but I loved it. Every time she was on, it's like, okay, it is evil time. Let's do it.
The diversity in this was much better.
Yeah.
Was much, much better than Coriolanus Snow was a white guy. He was written as a white guy, but you had diversity in almost all the other characters. There was Asian, there was Hispanic, there was black, there was all the colors of the rainbow.
A little person actor.
Not only in, and a girl with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
Not only in the games, not only in the other districts, but in the capital as well. There was diversity in the you had his classmates were Asian and black and Hispanic, and so
yeah.
So kudos to them on that. So all right, so we've been talking about this for 28 minutes.
I mean that's fine. It's what the people tune in to hear.
Uh-huh.
There was something else I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't. Now I can't remember what it is.
Costumes.
No.
Action sequences.
You can talk about the costumes if you want.
The costumes were really wonderful. I am with you on one part. She's wearing this embroidered dress with colors of the sunrise in her skirt.
Yeah, Lucy
really
Gray
beautiful.
is.
But she's rode in a cattle car, then lived in a zoo enclosure, and then wasn't an explosion at the arena.
Yeah.
And then fought in the Hunger Games, and her skirt still looked pretty clean.
Yeah. Not torn, not ripped. She's hiding in how many grubby caves and shit?
Climbing around all over the place. Like, I'm sorry, I have made tulle skirts before, and they are not going to stay together like that. Thank you very much. Okay? So, yeah, I will say that was not great. But, yeah, other than that, like, I loved the Peacekeeper costumes.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the uniform, like the Academy uniforms that they wore during the games.
That's the thing. That's what I wanted to talk about real quick.
Okay.
Is the one of the interesting thematic elements of this is the exploitation of children.
Right.
Because as we see and as we learn, it's not just the kids in the districts that they're exploiting, but making the students at the academy, not just like originally making them come up with the games, making them mentor. You know, they are really dehumanizing. Like, it's really showing how this is like this is a taught behavior.
It's like the Stanford prison experiment where
yes.
they make the prisoners and the guards, like they make the people into guards, and you are molded into this person whose sole purpose is to torture the other people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I was just thinking about that from a mirror perspective kind of thing thematically. That was really interesting that we got that perspective of that. You know, the kids, like I said, this is why I think the origin of the Hunger Games movie would have been more interesting, of this college kid coming up with I mean, I don't know about you, but my friends and I in high school came up with stupid ideas.
Right.
They're like, oh, this would be awesome. And then it's like, yeah, if that ever happened, you know, it'd be a shit show.
So one of the other things that you mentioned while we were watching is the look, where they have, it's a mixture of retro modern technology.
Yeah, which again, I think gives this film a much stronger visual language than it's had in the previous films.
Right. So yeah, I think that's kind of, well, I don't know, like not really steampunk, but kind of like
retro modern. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah, like, you know, the World War II kind of look with the round, like
the old timey TVs and the
So yeah, I think that was pretty cool.
Okay, so anyway, I just had to bring that up because I did want to talk about that, and I would have been mad if I didn't.
Okay, so overall,
so final grade for me, I'm gonna say a B- on this one. I think a lot of people have been very hard on it, and I do think the ending drags it down. But I do think there was some interesting ground to be covered, and it definitely felt like its own film. I am mad that I think a much more interesting story didn't get told, but
maybe it will.
Maybe, I don't know. You know, but overall, I kind of enjoyed it, so I can't be mad at it.
All right, I'm gonna actually just go a tiny bit higher than you with a B.
Okay.
Because I do think that the ending bogged it up.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it was in the writing, the directing, or the acting, but like you said, the point where he changes and he turns is not clear.
No, not at all.
For that big of a change, it needed to be.
Yeah.
So, and I think they could have made it more clear with the talent that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it should have been more obvious.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like, it was in world. It was in, it was.
I think in terms of villain prequels, it's definitely one of the better ones.
I would say so.
So.
Yeah. All
right. So there we go. So. All right, so we are still trying to catch up and get some of these last 2023 movies. We promise we will do a top 10 eventually. And we will start reviewing movies from this year eventually. So just bear with us, but thanks for coming along. Thanks for driving. Thank you, my love, for every date night, which you make so wonderful.
Oh, Pa.
No, Pa. Paulus. And thanks for joining us. And as always, drive safe, and we'll see you at the movies.